When you truly want to understand someone, stop listening only to the words they choose and start paying attention to their eyes, because the eyes will tell you the truth before the lips can form a sentence. They are not just windows to the soul, they are the silent broadcasters of everything a person feels but may never dare to speak. People can rehearse their lines, they can control their tone, they can force a smile, but when an emotion hits them in real time, the eyes react instantly and without permission. They dilate when something excites them, they narrow when they feel threatened, they avoid contact when they feel guilt or shame. Most people miss these cues because they're too distracted, too focused on responding instead of observing. If you slow yourself down and watch carefully, you will see these truths play out in every interaction you have. Imagine speaking to someone who claims they are happy to see you, but their eyes dart away and fail to meet yours for more than a second. That's not connection, that's evasion. Or picture a person insisting they're fine while a flash of sadness washes over their gaze before they force it away. That moment, that fraction of a second, is more honest than anything else they will say. When you learn to catch these flashes, you begin to read people at a level most never even consider. This is where your real power comes from. The ability to see through the facade without them ever realizing you've done it. Think about the last time someone lied to you. Their words may have been smooth, their tone calm, but if you replay the memory in your mind, you may recall a flicker of hesitation in their eyes. Maybe their pupils constricted just a little too fast, or they blinked in rapid succession as if to block out the guilt. Lies often live in the mouth, but the truth always leaks through the eyes. Once you start noticing this, you stop taking everything at face value. You begin to interact with people not just by hearing what they say, but by decoding what they really mean. The key is not to stare aggressively. People get uncomfortable when they feel scrutinized. But to be present and intentional. Look at someone's eyes when you greet them. Watch how they shift when certain topics come up. Notice the way they light up or dull down depending on what's being discussed. You'll find that emotions like joy, fear, anger, and attraction all have distinct signatures in the eyes. Joy softens and brightens them, fear makes them dart and widen, anger can harden the gaze into something sharp and unyielding. Attraction often comes with longer, lingering contact and dilation. These are primal reactions, ones we've carried for thousands of years, and they happen before logic or self-control can intervene. When you walk into a room, you can assess the temperature of the people there without a single word exchanged. Scan the eyes. Are they alert, bored, irritated, nervous? You'll see it before they even say hello. If you learn to recognize tension in someone's gaze, you can avoid walking blindly into unnecessary conflict. If you catch genuine excitement in someone's eyes, you'll know you've built trust or sparked interest. The eyes are the real-time report of the soul's weather, and the more you read them, the less you will be blindsided by storms. And this skill isn't just about defense, it's also about building stronger connections. When you truly look into someone's eyes and acknowledge what you see, they feel understood without you needing to say much at all. Sometimes just holding that gaze, without filling the silence, gives the other person permission to drop their guard and speak from a more authentic place. You're not guessing anymore, you're seeing. And seeing people for who they truly are changes the entire dynamic of your interactions. But you must be disciplined because it's easy to start making assumptions based on one look or one flicker. That's not mastery, that's impulsiveness. You need to watch patterns over time. If someone's eyes consistently avoid contact when speaking about certain subjects, there's likely a deeper story there. If they always brighten when a specific person enters the room, that tells you where their true alliances or affections lie. It's about building a mental archive of their honest moments and comparing them to their words. This is how you separate truth from performance. When you master reading the eyes, you will notice things that others completely miss. You'll see the coworker who says they're fine but whose gaze keeps scanning the exit, desperate to leave. You'll recognize the friend who insists they're over something, but whose eyes harden with unspoken resentment. You'll sense the partner who says they trust you, but whose gaze flinches every time certain names or places come up. These moments will no longer slip past you. They will stand out like flashing lights. And once you see the truth in someone's eyes, you can choose how to act. Sometimes it means calling it out directly. Sometimes it means holding the knowledge to yourself and moving strategically. But either way, you'll never again be completely in the dark. The world is full of people who speak with their mouths, but reveal themselves with their eyes, and those who know how to read them walk into every room with an advantage. You become the person who listens without always needing to hear, who understands without demanding confessions, who sees the truth even when it's buried beneath 1,000 well-chosen words. When you want to truly read people without speaking, you have to start by paying close attention to the smallest shifts in their body language, because the human body is constantly communicating even when the mouth is silent. You see, the truth is most people reveal more with their posture, micro movements, and gestures than they do with words. Words can be rehearsed. Words can be manipulated. But the body has a hard time lying, especially when emotions run high. If you walk into a room and someone's feet point toward the door, even if their face is smiling, their body is telling you they want to leave. If you're speaking to someone and they subtly turn their torso away, they might be signaling discomfort or a desire to disengage. These signs are not just random quirks, they are clues, breadcrumbs leading you to the truth about what someone is really thinking or feeling. The challenge is that most people are not trained to see them. They hear the words, but they miss the unspoken truth happening in front of them. Start with the eyes. Eyes are like windows into the mind, but not in the romanticized way you might hear in poetry, more in the sense that they betray focus, attention, and often emotion. Watch how quickly someone blinks when asked a question. Rapid blinking can sometimes indicate stress or discomfort. Notice if someone suddenly avoids eye contact after maintaining it earlier. It might be a sign they've been asked something they don't want to answer. You don't need to stare at them in an intimidating way. You just need to observe naturally. It's in the changes, the deviations from their baseline, where the truth often hides. If someone usually looks you straight in the eye but suddenly looks away the moment a certain topic comes up, that's a shift worth noting. The mouth is another powerful communicator, and I'm not talking about the words that come out of it. Tension in the jaw, lip biting, or pressing the lips together tightly can signal stress, disagreement, or even an attempt to hold back from speaking. A half smile that doesn't reach the eyes isn't real happiness. It's a social mask. When people force a smile, their mouth may move, but their eyes remain unchanged. Genuine smiles engage the muscles around the eyes, creating crow's feet even in young people. If you learn to spot the difference, you'll never mistake politeness for authenticity again. Posture speaks volumes as well. A confident person stands with shoulders back and chin up, but someone who feels insecure or threatened may hunch, tuck their chin, or make themselves physically smaller. It's not always about dominance or weakness. It's about the emotional state they're in at that moment. If you're in a negotiation and notice someone shifting from an open posture to crossed arms and legs, they may be feeling defensive or closed off to your ideas. That's your cue to either change your approach or address the tension in the room without directly calling it out. Even the smallest movements, the ones most people dismiss, are worth paying attention to. A quick glance toward the exit, fingers drumming on a table, or shifting weight from one foot to another can all reveal impatience or anxiety. When you see patterns like this, you're not just reading what they feel, you're predicting what they might do next. If you notice a colleague glancing repeatedly at their phone during a meeting, they're mentally somewhere else. If you see someone constantly adjusting their clothing or hair, they might be feeling self-conscious. The power of reading people lies in connecting these dots. One signal in isolation doesn't tell the whole story. Crossing arms doesn't always mean defensiveness. It could just mean they're cold. Avoiding eye contact could mean dishonesty, but it could also mean shyness. The key is to establish someone's baseline behavior when they're comfortable, and then notice when they deviate from it. That's when the unspoken truth comes into view. What makes this skill so effective is that you can use it without anyone ever realizing you're doing it. You're not interrogating, you're not judging. You're observing. This allows you to respond in a way that's precise, strategic, and empathetic. If you see signs of stress, you can ease tension without them having to admit it. If you sense excitement, you can encourage it at the right moment. You can read the battlefield before a single word is exchanged. Over time, this becomes second nature. You walk into any setting, boardroom, dinner table, or crowded event, and it's as if the room starts talking to you in a language only you can understand. You see who's confident, who's nervous, who's trying to dominate, and who's trying to disappear. And the most powerful part is that you're not relying on assumptions. You're relying on signals rooted in human nature itself. Once you master this, you don't need to chase control in conversations. You already have it because you can see what others can't hear. When you want to master reading people without saying a word, one of the most powerful skills you can develop is learning to read micro-expressions. These are those tiny, fleeting facial expressions that reveal a person's true feelings before they have a chance to hide them. They last less than a second, but in that brief moment, you can catch a glimpse of the truth. You've seen it before. Someone says they're fine, but there's a flash of anger, fear, or sadness across their face. That's a micro-expression, and it's not an accident. It's the brain sending a signal before the person can consciously mask it. People can control their words. They can control their tone. But controlling a micro-expression, that's almost impossible. And this is why it's a goldmine for anyone who wants to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Start by training your attention to the face. Don't stare aggressively. That will make people defensive. But learn to observe casually while in conversation. Pay attention to the eyes, eyebrows, and mouth. These are the areas that shift the most during emotional leaks. For example, a quick tightening of the lips might signal frustration or disapproval, even if the person is smiling a moment later. A fleeting eyebrow raise might indicate surprise or disbelief, even if their voice sounds steady. Over time, you'll begin to recognize these patterns without overthinking them. But that recognition takes practice. You can't just read about it and expect to see it. You have to expose yourself to different emotional situations, watch interactions, and rewind moments in your mind to catch what you missed in real time. One common mistake people make is assuming that a single expression tells the full story. It doesn't. A micro-expression is a clue, not a verdict. It's part of a bigger puzzle. You need to pair it with other signals, body language, tone, and context, before jumping to conclusions. For example, a person might flash anger when you make a harmless comment, but it could be because that comment touched a deeper nerve unrelated to you. The point isn't to play detective for the sake of proving you're right. It's to be more aware so you can respond in a way that's effective, not reactive. When you understand the emotion beneath the surface, you gain the ability to navigate conversations with precision. You won't get blindsided as often, because you'll see the tension building before it explodes. You'll know when someone's enthusiasm is genuine and when it's just a mask to hide disinterest. Another important part of mastering microexpressions is learning to regulate your own. If you can read them, others can read yours. Sometimes revealing your true emotions is a strength. It builds trust and shows authenticity. But there are situations where control is essential, especially when dealing with people who may use your emotions against you. Being aware of your own facial reactions trains you to hold your ground under pressure. It means not flinching when someone tries to provoke you. It means keeping your composure when negotiations get tense. This is how you turn observation into both insight and influence. To sharpen this skill, practice in safe environments. Watch interviews with the sound off. Pay attention to the faces of people listening as much as the ones speaking. Observe how their expressions shift when they agree, disagree, or feel uncomfortable. Replay these clips and match them to the context. Over time, your brain will store these emotional patterns, and you'll start catching them automatically in real life. At first, it might feel like work, like you're consciously scanning people's faces, but eventually, it becomes second nature. You'll pick up a flash of contempt, a spike of fear, or a spark of joy without needing to analyze it. And that's when the skill becomes truly powerful. This isn't about turning into a mind reader. It's about becoming attuned to the truth that people try to hide. In a world where words can be polished, rehearsed, or completely fabricated, micro-expressions are the closest thing you have to an unfiltered feed of emotion. They give you an edge not because they tell you everything, but because they tell you something that most people miss. When you see what's really happening, you can adjust your response in real time, avoid unnecessary conflict, and strengthen your influence without ever raising your voice. That's the power of reading what others can't hide. And once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. One of the strongest yet most underestimated indicators of a person's true intentions is their baseline behavior, the way they naturally act when they are comfortable and unguarded. If you want to catch deception, manipulation, or hidden agendas, you must first learn what normal looks like for that individual. Without this baseline, you're guessing in the dark. People often misread signals because they assume certain gestures or tones always mean the same thing, but in reality, meaning depends on what is typical for that person. For example, one person might always avoid eye contact, even when they're telling the truth, simply because that's their natural style. Another might fidget constantly, not because they're lying, but because they're anxious in general. If you assume that every sign of discomfort equals dishonesty, you will make serious mistakes in judgment. The key is to observe without judgment at the start. Watch how they act in low-pressure situations, moments where they have no reason to lie, hide, or pretend. Notice their speech patterns, their tone of voice, their gestures, their posture. Pay attention to how fast or slow they normally speak, whether their voice rises or falls at the end of sentences, and how much they move their hands when talking. This is your baseline data. Once you know it, you can spot deviations with precision. If a normally confident speaker suddenly starts using filler words, hesitating, or shrinking their body posture, that shift is a red flag. It doesn't automatically mean they're lying, but it does mean something has changed internally. That changes your cue to dig deeper. This is why baseline behavior is such a powerful tool. It makes every future observation sharper. Instead of relying on generic lists of signs of lying or manipulation cues, you're reading the person in front of you as an individual. People are not one size fits all, and treating them as if they are is how you get blindsided. Think about poker players. The best ones don't just memorize tells from a book. They study their opponents for hours, noting what they do when they're bluffing versus when they're holding strong cards. They know that for one player, scratching their neck means nothing, while for another it's a dead giveaway. The same applies in everyday life. Once you establish a baseline, you'll see deviations instantly, even in subtle ways that most people would miss. However, spotting a deviation is only step one. Step two is interpreting it within context. A change in behavior could be caused by stress, fatigue, embarrassment, excitement, or yes, deception. You have to combine the baseline shift with the surrounding circumstances. For instance, if a person who's normally calm starts speaking faster and stumbling over words right after you ask about a specific event, that spike in anxiety might point to something they don't want to reveal. On the other hand, if they show the same behavior after receiving bad personal news earlier in the day, it may have nothing to do with your question. Context keeps you from making false accusations or assumptions. The other benefit of knowing someone's baseline is that it gives you leverage in maintaining control during tense situations. If you see a sudden shift, you can decide how to respond before the other person realizes you've noticed it. You can slow the conversation down, change the subject, or press further depending on what your goal is. That level of awareness makes you harder to manipulate because you're reacting to real time changes rather than the surface level performance someone is putting on. In high-stakes conversations, whether it's a negotiation, a confrontation, or a moment of persuasion, that awareness can be the difference between winning and losing. To develop this skill, you need patience. Don't rush the process of establishing someone's baseline. Sometimes it takes days or even weeks of observation, depending on how often you interact and how open they are in your presence. Avoid tipping them off that you're studying them. The moment people feel watched, they start performing. The most accurate readings come when someone believes they're not being analyzed at all. This means you have to be discreet, blending your observations into normal interactions without making them feel like they're under a microscope. One of the best ways to practice is by observing people you already know well. Because you have history with them, you likely already have a rough idea of their baseline. Challenge yourself to notice when they break from it. Did your usually easygoing friend suddenly get tense when a certain name was mentioned? Did your coworker, who normally speaks in a measured tone, suddenly speed up during a specific topic in a meeting? Each time you catch a deviation, think about what could have triggered it. Over time, you'll start seeing patterns. Certain topics, people, or situations will consistently cause the same changes in behavior. These patterns give you valuable insight into what matters to them, what they fear, and where they may be hiding something. Mastering baseline behavior is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about increasing your situational awareness so you can make better decisions about who to trust, when to press forward, and when to hold back. It's a skill that works quietly in the background, protecting you from manipulation and giving you an edge in understanding human behavior at a deeper level. When you know what normal looks like, you can spot the abnormal in an instant. And once you see it, you have the power to decide your next move before anyone else even realizes there's a shift in the game. When you want to truly read someone without saying a word, one of the most powerful cues you can watch is their facial microexpressions. These are those fleeting, involuntary expressions that flash across a person's face in a fraction of a second. Too fast to consciously fake or suppress. They are the truth that leaks out when the mind wants to hide something, but the body can't keep up. Most people miss them because they're subtle, quick, and buried under the person's controlled mask. But if you train yourself to notice them, you will start to see emotions before the person has time to edit their behavior. A micro-expression might be a split-second tightening of the lips when someone hears bad news but pretends to be fine, or a brief widening of the eyes before they compose themselves in a poker game. When you see it, you know you've caught the raw, unfiltered truth. To master reading them, you must slow yourself down internally. People miss these signals because they're too busy thinking about what to say next, how to respond, or how they look. But when you drop the internal noise and focus your attention like a laser, you will begin to catch them. It's like watching the surface of a pond. Still water reflects clearly, but ripples distort the image. Your mind must be that still water. Another important part is baseline reading. Before you can spot an unusual flash of emotion, you need to know what this person's normal looks like. How do they typically smile? How do they rest their face? Do they normally furrow their brow, or is that unusual for them? Once you know the baseline, any deviation stands out like a flare. And here's the thing. Microexpressions don't just reveal lies, they reveal feelings someone hasn't yet decided whether to share. This gives you insight that lets you navigate conversations, negotiations, or conflicts with a significant advantage. If you're interviewing someone, you can detect when a question hits a nerve. If you're dealing with a potential threat, you can spot fear or aggression before the person acts. But to use this power effectively, you must handle it with integrity. The goal isn't to weaponize what you see to manipulate or humiliate someone. It's to understand reality more clearly so you can respond wisely. If you misuse it, people will sense it, and trust will vanish. This skill also requires that you don't just rely on a single cue. One microexpression can mean many things. Fear might come from guilt or from surprise. Disgust could be aimed at a topic or at themselves. Context is everything. Pair what you see with what's happening in the moment, the person's background, and other body language cues. Over time, your brain starts to link patterns effortlessly, and you'll read people almost instinctively. The key is patience and deliberate observation. Practice in everyday interactions, not just high-stakes moments. Watch the cashier's face when a rude customer speaks. Notice the flicker of emotion in a colleague when someone else gets credit for their work. Study interviews, debates, or real-world footage where you can replay and slow down. Every repetition sharpens your eye. This is the edge few people take the time to develop, because most don't even realize how much truth is hidden in plain sight until someone points it out. Another way to master the art of reading people without saying a word is by paying attention to their posture and how they carry themselves in different situations. The human body is like a billboard that announces a person's inner state long before they open their mouth. The way someone stands, sits, leans, or moves communicates confidence, insecurity, dominance, submission, openness, or defensiveness without them realizing it. Posture is deeply tied to emotion and mindset because our nervous system influences how we hold ourselves. For example, a person who stands tall with their shoulders back and head held high is often signaling self-assurance, while someone who slouches, keeps their head down, and pulls their limbs inward is unconsciously making themselves smaller. A posture that often reflects discomfort, insecurity, or a desire not to be noticed. These signals become even more telling when you observe how someone's posture changes over time. Someone might start a meeting sitting upright and engaged, but as the conversation shifts to a difficult topic, they may lean away, cross their arms, or angle their body toward the exit. These shifts are rarely random. They reflect the mind adjusting to new information, stress, or emotion. Reading posture also means watching how a person occupies space. Confident people tend to expand, resting an arm across the back of a chair, standing with their feet apart, taking up more room. Those who feel threatened or unsure shrink in, tuck their arms close, or fold their legs tightly. But be careful. Confidence and arrogance can look similar in posture, and so can humility and fear. That's why context and baseline matter. How does this person normally stand or sit when they are comfortable? How does it change when they are around certain people or in certain situations? You can learn a great deal by comparing posture across different environments. This observation skill becomes especially useful in group dynamics. In a room full of people, you can spot who feels in control and who feels sidelined just by how they position themselves relative to others. Is someone leaning toward the center of the conversation, or are they angled away? Is their torso open toward the group, or is it turned as if ready to disengage? Even in silence, the body broadcasts belonging, exclusion, agreement, or resistance. Posture can also reveal readiness. Someone who subtly leans forward when listening is mentally engaged, prepared to act, or deeply interested in what's happening. On the other hand, leaning back with crossed arms can signal detachment, skepticism, or an internal decision to resist what's being presented. But to sharpen this skill, you must resist the urge to judge instantly. Posture can be shaped by habit, culture, physical discomfort, or even clothing. That's why you don't lock onto one moment. You observe patterns over time. Watch posture shifts before, during, and after key moments. Pair those observations with other signals like facial expressions, breathing changes, and gestures. Over time, you'll see how posture often acts as the big picture canvas of a person's emotions, while micro-expressions and gestures are the smaller, faster brushstrokes. The more you connect the two, the more accurately you'll understand someone's state of mind. This is how you start to notice things others miss. A person smiling politely while their body is angled toward the door, a colleague nodding in agreement while their feet point away from the table, a friend laughing while their shoulders subtly hunch inward. These contradictions tell you when someone's words and body are out of sync, and that's often where the truth lies. Another essential way to master the art of reading people without saying a word is to study how they use their hands and gestures when they communicate. Hands are some of the most honest parts of the body because they are harder to consciously control for long periods of time. People may rehearse their words or train their facial expressions, but the hands often betray what's really going on beneath the surface. The way someone moves, hides, or positions their hands reveals nervousness, confidence, authority, or even deception. Think about someone who's comfortable in a conversation. Often their hands move naturally to emphasize their words, palms are occasionally visible, and their gestures feel fluid rather than forced. In contrast, a person who's anxious or guarded might fidget with an object, wring their hands, touch their face repeatedly, or keep their hands hidden in pockets or under a table. These movements are rarely random. They are self-soothing behaviors that the nervous system triggers when a person is under stress. Learning to read them means paying attention not just to the gestures themselves, but to when they appear. If someone starts fiddling with a pen right after a sensitive question, or their hand movements suddenly stop when a certain topic comes up, that pause is just as meaningful as the motion. Gestures also tell you about a person's level of openness or control in a situation. Open palms, for example, signal honesty or a willingness to engage, while closed fists, finger pointing, or chopping motions often carry aggression or dominance. The size and speed of gestures matter too. Large, sweeping movements can signal confidence, excitement, or a desire to command attention, while small, tight, restrained gestures can suggest caution, uncertainty, or a fear of overstepping. And then there are the unconscious touches, scratching the neck, rubbing the back of the head, or pulling at sleeves. These subtle actions often appear when someone feels pressure or discomfort. The key is not to overinterpret a single action, but to notice patterns and shifts. Hands can also show you where a person's mind is in a conversation. If they're using their hands to mirror your movements, it often signals rapport and alignment, even if they don't realize they're doing it. On the other hand, if their hands are busy with something unrelated, checking a phone, tapping on a table, it may indicate distraction, impatience, or disengagement. This becomes even more telling in group settings, where hand gestures can reveal who holds influence. The person whose hands subtly direct attention, who points and others respond, often has more power than the loudest voice in the room. Another detail to observe is how someone uses their hands when they're silent. Many people assume silence means stillness, but the hands may still be active, tapping, rubbing, or folding in certain ways. These micro movements can signal what the person is holding back from saying. The stillness itself can also be intentional, used as a way to project calm or control in a tense environment. Skilled negotiators, for example, often keep their hands steady and visible to signal confidence and trustworthiness. The more you watch people's hands, the more you begin to notice how often they betray the truth that the mouth tries to hide. A person might say they're fine while their hands twist the corner of a napkin. They might insist they're confident while their fingers drum nervously against their thigh. They might agree to something while subconsciously pulling their hands away from the table, signaling withdrawal. These are the kinds of cues that allow you to navigate situations more effectively, not to manipulate but to understand the reality behind the words. Over time, you'll see that gestures and hand movements are not isolated signals. They're part of a larger language of the body that blends with posture, facial expressions, and tone of voice. By focusing on the hands, you add another layer to your ability to decode a person's inner state. It's not about memorizing a checklist of meanings, it's about developing the patience to observe without judgment and the discipline to connect patterns over time. This is how you start to read people like an open book, even when they're doing everything they can to keep the cover closed. Another powerful indicator of what someone is truly thinking or feeling is how they manage personal space and proximity. Human beings have an invisible boundary around them, what psychologists call a personal space bubble, and how close or far someone chooses to position themselves from you or others says a lot about their mindset. Someone who feels comfortable, trusting, or aligned with you will often move closer, lean in, or angle their body toward you. On the other hand, someone who feels guarded, threatened, or uninterested will naturally pull back, turn slightly away, or put objects between you and them, like a coffee cup, a bag, or even a folded arm. These shifts often happen unconsciously, yet they're deeply telling. You might notice a friend suddenly leaning back when a sensitive topic comes up, or a colleague sliding their chair slightly away when the conversation turns to accountability. That movement is their subconscious creating distance to protect themselves. Personal space isn't universal. It changes with culture, personality, and relationship dynamics. But what matters most is the change from someone's baseline. A person who usually stands close but suddenly steps back is signaling something significant. In high-stakes situations, these shifts are magnified. In negotiations, for example, someone leaning in aggressively may be trying to assert dominance, while taking a deliberate step back can be a way to reclaim control or create tension. In social interactions, a subtle lean toward you while you speak often signals interest, respect, or a desire to connect, while leaning away can mean skepticism, disapproval, or disengagement. The art is in catching these micro adjustments as they happen rather than just noticing where someone is standing overall. Objects in the environment often become extensions of personal space. A person holding a bag in front of them, keeping a coffee cup raised like a shield, or placing their phone between you can be creating a barrier. Sometimes consciously, but often without realizing it. Conversely, when someone moves objects aside, sets their drink down, or opens their posture by uncrossing arms, it's usually a sign they're opening up to the interaction. These small, seemingly irrelevant actions are like physical punctuation, marks in the silent conversation their body is having with you. Personal space also reveals status and influence. People who feel dominant or entitled to a space often take up more of it. They spread their arms, lean back, put their feet up, or place belongings widely around them. Those who feel less secure tend to shrink into a smaller footprint, keeping their limbs close and belongings tucked in. Watch group dynamics, and you'll notice that the person others subtly orient toward or make space for is often the one with the most influence, even if they're not speaking. Proximity is also a powerful tool for building or breaking trust. Closing the gap between you and someone else, done respectfully, can create a sense of intimacy and collaboration. But overstepping that invisible line too soon or too often can trigger discomfort, defensiveness, or even hostility. Skilled communicators adjust their proximity in real time, moving closer to show empathy or interest and stepping back when they sense tension or the need to give someone room. This dance of distance and closeness is part of what makes certain people feel effortlessly charismatic. They intuitively calibrate their presence to match the other person's comfort level. Sometimes, the most telling thing about personal space is how it changes with time. A person might start a conversation standing several feet away, but gradually close the gap as trust builds, signaling that you've earned a place inside their comfort zone. Or the opposite might happen. They begin close but retreat as you speak, perhaps because something you've said triggered doubt or discomfort. These shifts are often more honest than words because while people can fake enthusiasm verbally, their subconscious control over distance is much harder to mask. By training yourself to notice these subtle shifts in proximity and space, you gain insight into the unspoken truth of any interaction. It's not about invading or manipulating. It's about listening with your eyes as much as with your ears, picking up on the messages that exist between the words. When you can read those messages, you move through conversations with a quiet advantage, understanding what others are feeling before they even decide to tell you.